What's up, everybody? I'm Z-Wade, the Z-Wade and Z-Wade Photo, and today I want to talk about the ZFC, but not really the ZFC itself, but rather the silliest lenses for your Nikon ZFC. Now, for the sake of this argument, I am excluding the idea of using the L grip that you can get for the ZFC. We're talking just the base camera itself, because some lenses just look or feel totally impractical or silly. If you were to have the L grip, then perhaps some of these lenses would be a little more comfortable. But we have some random criteria that I'm going to make up as I go, so let's get into it. The first silliest lens for your Nikon ZFC is actually the one that is recording me right now, and that is the Nikon Z 24-70 f2.8s. So why is it silly? It doesn't look particularly silly on the ZFC, but it is a little bit hefty for the ZFC without the L grip that we talked about earlier. And also, I feel like that lens is really flagship level, and it's incredibly expensive. At the making of this video, it's around $2,400. And so if you're shooting a ZFC, what are you using the ZFC for? Now, the files out of the Nikon ZFC are fantastic, and the image producing capability of the 24-70 f2.8s is mind-bending, especially for a zoom. I can't believe how good that lens is, and it just doesn't... I feel like the ZFC probably doesn't do justice to that lens being at $2,400, but a less silly lens that's also absolutely fantastic and a pretty reasonable price for what you're getting is the 24-70 f4s. It is still an S-line lens, under half the price, I believe, at the making of this video, somewhere in the $1,000 range. You could pick them up used all day in great condition, and that is a much more comfortable feeling lens. It is shorter, it's smaller, it's more compact, it feels better on the front of the ZFC, and that would be a less silly lens for your Nikon ZFC. Next, for silliest lenses for your Nikon ZFC, we've got the 50mm f1.2. This is my favorite lens ever. However, on the ZFC, it's totally silly. As we can see, attached to the ZFC, it looks a little silly. It's also incredibly expensive, okay? You pay a premium for f1.2 and whatever juiciness is in this lens that doesn't exist in any of the other Nikon Z-mount lenses. What else is silly about it besides the way that it looks? Well, without the L grip, it feels incredibly sketchy on the front of your Nikon ZFC. Now, my gut tells me that this wouldn't rip out your mount, but it feels like it would rip out your mount because this camera weighs nothing and this lens is super heavy. With the price of the 50mm f1.2s being about $2,100, similar to the 24-70 f2.8s, the price is kind of unjustifiable for this camera. Again, this camera has great image output, but I feel like you're selling yourself a little bit short with this 50mm f1.2 because this is a peak performing lens on a rather novelty, fun kind of camera, right? And so I find it to be a little bit silly in my mind to buy a Nikon ZFC with the intention of one day throwing the 50mm f1.2. I would use one of the higher megapixel cameras, such as the Z7 II or the Z9, or just something with better performance, such as the Z6 II or the 6 or the 7, whatever. Those are better suited for such a high-performing lens. And that's why the 50mm 1.2 is a little silly on a Nikon ZFC. The final lens of this video is by far the silliest for your Nikon ZFC, and that is the 70-200mm f2.8s. Again, I'll just mention briefly, this is a $2,600 lens, I think, at the making of this video, so its price is just way out of line with what the Nikon ZFC is. Similar to the 50mm 1.2, this definitely feels like it would rip out your mount. It's probably not going to, but it feels like that because it is so heavy on the front of the ZFC. And let's just take a second to appreciate just how silly this actually looks. As far as image quality goes, this lens is one of my least favorites in the Nikon Z lineup. but this is one of the fastest on the Nikon Z9, and speed is not the name of the game for the ZFC. If you don't know that, just go look at the specs. I don't know what the frames per second are, but it's low. This lens, speed-wise, totally will outperform the Nikon Zfc, okay? This lens means business, okay? Work business. Not very artistic. Artistic-looking files, not a very artistic-looking lens. This lens is built for speed, and this is not. At the end of the day, spend your money however you want. These are just my opinions. I just happen to think that these lenses are a little bit silly. It's mostly a price game. If you're gonna pay that much for a lens, you might as well pay more money for a camera that can keep up with what these lenses put out.